Recording in progress.
Welcome, everyone. A regular meeting of the City Council on Monday, March 2nd, 2026. I'll request the city clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Bushy.
Present.
Councilmember Hill.
Present.
Vice Mayor Kurtz.
Present.
Councilmember Yedenskalani.
Present.
Mayor Kate is absent, so Vice Mayor Kurtz will be Mayor Pro Tem this evening.
Thank you. I'd like to invite City Attorney Rob Epstein to report out on the closed session that was held prior to the meeting tonight.
Thank you. Good evening. No reportable action was taken in closed session.
Thank you. Well, here we are in March. Hard to believe, a lot going on in the world these days. I'd especially like to thank staff for all their hard work. As you've seen in the agenda tonight, this is the beginning of our ramp up to budget planning. So not only are the staff working on their day job, they're also now working on their future, what's happening. So it's a lot, and really appreciate everyone's time and effort that it takes into running the city. Like to invite the clerk to say a few comments regarding tonight's meeting.
Thank you. Tonight's meeting is being recorded and streamed live to YouTube. For members of the public wishing to provide public comment, displayed on the podium and the projector is a timer to help you stay within your 2-minute time frame. You're invited, though not required, to introduce yourself and say what part of Centerville you live in, or if you're from outside of Centerville. Viewers may request a reasonable accommodation to provide public comment virtually. For more information about that, or if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, you can email me at city.clerk@cityofcenterville.org. Thank you.
Thank you. This time we'll open up public comment. For 10 minutes. If there's any comments from the public on topics not on tonight's agenda, I have 2 cards that have been submitted. I'll start with those, and then if there's anyone else who'd like to make a public comment, we will go ahead and do that. Please.
Some people have asked to have an item from the consent calendar, and that would obviously affect whether we speak at that time or in public open time.
I'll have the city clerk address that.
At this moment, we're taking public comment on items that are not on the agenda, but once Mayor Pro Tem Kurtz calls the consent calendar to order, at that point, you can come up. She'll request if any council member wishes to have an item held from the consent calendar, and then there'll be an opportunity to invite public comment on the consent calendar as well. Correct.
Right, thank you. I'd like to invite up Elena Garnuchet.
That's why I wrote that.
Thank you for doing that.
Yes, good evening. My name is Elena Garnachet, and I have been asking, pleading, begging unsuccessfully for 2.5 years for stop signs on Smith Ranch Road in Yosemite. It's a T intersection, and there is an extreme amount of traffic. And it's like jumping rope. It's like, can I go? Can I not? Can I go? Can I not? And when those sports fields open up for soccer, it really is insane. We get a lot of teenagers in their souped up Hondas, and they're just going shoom down the road, 50, 60 miles an hour. They're teenagers. And then there's a lot of people that aren't children. There are 16 places of interest at the end of that, besides the golf course. There's, a bus stop, and there's the flights thing, and then there's the soccer fields, and there's the golf course, and the mini golf course, and the soccer fields, and the tennis courts, and the trails. And there's a lot that draws a tremendous amount of traffic. I'm not asking for lights. I'm asking for a stop sign on both sides of Smith Ranch Road, east and west, and that will help tremendously. I'm on the board of directors for the HOA at Contempo, and it is unanimous with everyone that comes to the meetings that a stop sign would greatly be appreciated, and for safety reasons needed. I'm tired of seeing dead cats and skunks and raccoons and things on the road for the people that are speeding. All we need is one really good fatality, and maybe that will get something going. But it's very dangerous, and I would really appreciate it. I even have a little video to show that how much traffic there is, especially during rush hour, because there's no rushing. So, if I have time, if the speed limit is 55 from around Civic Center on, why don't you paint 55 on the road? Because people coming from the 65 miles an hour that are going 75 miles an hour
Thank you.
are right up on me. And if it was painted,
Thank you.
then they might not, because they may not see a sign. I'm tired of having people flipping me off right on my tail, trying to rush me.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Joe, Small Business Administration? There we go.
Hi, good evening. Yes, I'm Joe. I'm with the Small Business Administration. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak at this time. I have some packets, if I may. The Small Business Administration is in the area to notify homeowners, business owners, renters, and small nonprofits that Marin County was added to the disaster declaration for California, Declaration 21431. And with that declaration, it allows eligibility for homeowners, renters, business, and nonprofits to seek disaster loan assistance from king tide floodings from early December, early or end of December, early January, the king tide floodings that came in. With that, there's an application deadline for physical disaster loans for April 6th and for economic injury disaster loans for November 3rd. For the physical disaster loans, it helps assist homeowners replace, repair, rebuild home property, vehicles, boats, anything that's considered personal property. And for economic injury disaster loans, if there was a loss of capital during that time, we would have to close doors because of the storm, and a decrease in business, also a loss of equipment and things of that nature. They can seek assistance with the loans. It's for homeowners can be as low as 2.875. For business owners, as low as 4%. And the key takeaway is there's no interest or payments due for the first 12 months. And so homeowners, renters, business, and nonprofits can use those loans in order to assist the repair or rebuild while waiting for maybe insurance to go through and get it started and have it paid off before the 12 months with no interest. And so if there's any questions, I'm here. I'll be in the area until mid-March to answer any questions. My business cards are in the folder. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Madam Vice Mayor.
Who'd like to speak to public comment on items not on tonight's agenda? Not on tonight's agenda. You're welcome to state your name and where you live.
Good evening, members of the council. I'm Stephen Bingham from Terra Linda, and I bring you good news. You may or may not know that the state legislature last fall, SB 707, amended the Public Records Act, the Brown Act, to now require that public agencies provide public comment on Zoom. And I'm going to hand this out. There's one copy with a complete section, and then for each of you, just the specific section. It's not effective until July 1st. However, this is something I've been arguing about for many years, and particularly because of my involvement going to PAC meetings where there will be very few people and nobody's allowed to make any comments online. Aside from democracy and open government, it's also a disability issue. I'm going blind. I can't drive at night. I have a very hard time even seeing all of you up here clearly to know who is who. And I can perform as other disabled blind people can much better with on Zoom. And I strongly urge you to implement this new section immediately and not wait until July 1st. It is really important for those of us in the community who want to participate. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hello, everyone. Heidi Merchant. I just want to echo what the last speaker said, that in alignment with city values of accessibility and equity, it's really important for folks who don't have access to transportation and who have disabilities to also be able to participate when the meetings are happening, not just be observing online or not just be watching meetings later where they can't actually get their voices heard. So I hope you'll strongly consider implementing that as soon as possible before it's actually mandated. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. What is it? I think we're close to our 10 minutes, but okay, go ahead. Why don't you go, Lindsay, where are we at on our 10? Another minute or so? Okay, why don't you go ahead? And then public comment will continue at the end of the meeting.
You're saying public comments is limited to 10 minutes?
No.
No. All right. Oh, I'm just going to talk and then stop me when I run out of time. Minor issues, not even issues, minor comments. I used to use ClickFix a lot I walk around the city a lot and I like to see things and I like to report the things that I see that might be of benefit if they were changed and fixed. And recently when I tried to use ClickFix, I was required to register, which I kind of felt a little bad about because then I'm tracked and I really don't want to be tracked. So I'm wondering if that could be changed. And if it can't, it can't. I just wanted to bring it up as an objection for myself. With that in mind, some of the things that I might report are, this is more self-preservation, but in my area, they've replaced a number of the sidewalks that had recently had red painted curbs, but after the renovation, they no longer have red painted curbs. Would mean that people are parking in areas that were originally designated as hazardous for the individuals living in the places. So I'm wondering if there's a wait, and I would have used ClickFix to say, hey, could you look at that to see if in fact having a red painted curb is still a requirement, and if so, could you restore this particular one so that driving out of a space you weren't running the risk of being T-boned, I guess is what they call that. That's one. And recently, or last year, I guess it was, there was an effort to reduce the number of street vendors, but it seems like the street vendors have figured out that at a certain time of the day, it's okay to come out and sell their stuffs in front of Safeway. And that would have been another item I might have put it into ClickFix to say, hey, these guys are getting pretty brazen about what they do. They and have, the same vendors show up at the same spot almost on the same point in time that sort of coincides with the time that the city hall is closed. And others have maybe reported this, but the streets are getting damaged. There's holes, there are potholes everywhere. And I think it has to do with all the, partially, not completely, the PG&E trucks that are working through Bayview. If you drive down Bayview, be careful because it's becoming very treacherous.
Thank you. If the council will allow me, I think we have one more public comment. If you'd like to come up, so you have.
My name's Christian Vibrock. We have 4 scouts here tonight who are working on their communications merit badge, which they need to attend a public meeting. And I hope you all have public debate upon something as they have to write about 3 differing opinions. Thank you.
Huh. Okay, thanks. We'll work on that. All right. We'll go ahead and move on to any comments from the public. We have their city manager and council member reports. Start with Councilmember Bushy.
Usually we start with the manager.
Oh, city manager, thank you. Hello.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, members of the council. The first item I had was actually the information that was shared in public comment by the representative from the Small Business Administration regarding the disaster loan program available to those impacted by the King Tide incident. I will just add that city staff is working with our community partners on outreach for that program, and more information is available on the city's website, as well as through the sources that were presented here this evening. Our summer activity guide was out recently, and registration actually started today. So there's a usual diverse array of learning, recreation, and community enrichment opportunities available to members of the public, and we encourage folks to check them out and register early and register often. We noted last meeting that the city issued, again, the RFP related to the Northgate specific plan, and just noting that those responses will be due on March 16th, and then processing them accordingly. Again, more information is on the website. I think this has been mentioned, but we will, it was anticipatory. The city has now transitioned to our new updated city permitting system, OpenGov. That went live, I believe, last Monday. And so in addition to being a kind of new and improved platform for both staff and those accessing our permitting process to work on that online. It consolidates several of our existing permitting between building, planning, code enforcement, but also fire prevention, public works. Again, information is on the website, and I believe we're open to feedback and constructive feedback on how we can continue to refine that. I will also note that for permit applications that were filed prior to February 23rd, those are still in the old system and will be processed through that system, and all new permits going forward are now in the new system. That concludes my comments. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Bushy.
I attended 3 meetings on February 20th, along with the mayor. I attended the board meeting of San Rafael Sanitation District. It was a big meeting for us. We approved our draft operating agreement with the Central Marin Sanitation Agency. That will be a big change for our SAN. On February 23rd, along with Councilmember Hill, I attended the Measure P subcommittee meeting. Very happy news across the boards there, and also a heads up to the rest of the council that that Griffin Structures will be bringing forward their facility program and budget, as well as a proposal on the delivery method for the structure for the new library, which may include a design build option. So just so we're informed about that. And lastly, today, along with Councilmember Lorenz Galati and I, we attended the Marin County Transit Board of Directors meeting. We both had an opinion that the upcoming fare proposal change, which will encourage the use of Clipper cards because discounts are available there, should be accompanied by an aggressive education policy so that everyone will know to use their Clipper card. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Councilmember Hill.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I have 2 meetings that I want to report on. Councilmember Bush already mentioned that she and I attended the Measure P subcommittee. The only thing I would add is that the conceptual statement of probable cost for the community center library is currently at $105 million, which it will be a great library. I encourage everybody to watch the video for the full readout from Griffin Structures. I also attended a meeting on Wednesday, February 25th, with the Vice Mayor and Mayor Kate. We attended the Marin County Council of Mayors and Council Members. Speakers included Assemblymember Connolly, as well as Canal Alliance CEO Omar Carrera. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lawrence Galati.
Yes, thank you. On February 17, I attended the San Rafael Chamber of Commerce Economic Forum. Actually, our Vice Mayor was one of the panelists, and it was very, very well attended, and it's always very interesting to see if they are going to be right or wrong about the economic forecast for a year. I also attended on February 19th the Canal Promise Neighborhood Steering Committee meeting with Mayor Kate, and that's our focus in the canal, just to see how we can improve specifically youth and families living in the canal. Also attended the MC board meeting that day, looking at the budget for next year, and we are looking into reducing rates for next year as well. Today I had the executive committee for MC, again, a lot of discussions around budgeting, and the Marine Transit meeting with Councilmember Bushy, and one of the highlights, they were talking about some of the changing and upgrading for like bus stops. There is going to be a new one on East San Rafael and Medway, so that is going to help people not to have to do the entire loop to get out of the bus. So that's just one example, but we always encourage you to take a look and see what Marine Transit is doing. So that's my report. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'll just add on a couple items. I had the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority board meeting. We had the retreat that was added on to that. The only thing that came out of the retreat is that we need to have another retreat because we did not get through, and the next one is actually going to be probably a half day, and that one will be scheduled probably in March. We're in March. So yeah, March. I attended with Mayor Kate. We had our homeless subcommittee, and then I had the MCCMC Marin County Council of Mayors and Council Members, our legislative meeting where we look at potentially new policy items that will be coming forward at the state level. Okay. If I'll open it up to public comment. If there's any public comment on the city manager or council member reports, you're welcome to come forward. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Consent calendar. Are there any items to be held from the consent calendar? No? Seeing none. Are there any comments from the public on the consent calendar?
Their troop leader did ask for items for debate. I am asking tonight that you remove item G from the consent calendar. After the police beating of Julio Jimenez Lopez, this council created a PAC, Police Advisory and Accountability Committee, to bring transparency, trust, and accountability to SRPD. One of the PAC's primary duties is to make recommendations to the city council regarding police policy, procedures, and best practices. But it seems the PAC is being deprived of this important power. In 2025, the PAC seriously explored the issue of San Rafael policing disparities, which was at the core of community concerns with Mr. Jimenez Lopez's case. The PAC held 2 full hearings on the RIPA data and Act, Racial Identity and Profiling Act. It carefully studied San Rafael, stop demographics, and it overwhelmingly adopted 4 RIPA-informed recommendations. The recommendations target practices that evidence showed are causing substantial policing disparities for Black and Latinx people in San Rafael. Staff told the PAC it could submit those recommendations to the council through the annual report. This was not even halfway through the year. But the annual report that staff prepared neglects to even mention San Rafael policing disparities. The report completely conceals the substance, purpose, and operations of the PAC's recommendations. Then the report is placed on the consent calendar, leaving those of us that attend every month wondering what's happening. This dismissive approach dishonors the PAC and buries the vitally important issue of racial profiling disparities in San Rafael. MV Free has offered a supplement to the annual report containing the information the council needs to understand to approve the PAC's recommendations. Please adopt these RIPA best practices and protect our community.
Thank you. You're welcome to state your name and where you live.
I'm Tammy Edmondson. I am the principal RIPA data analyst for MV Free, here to answer questions the council might have about RIPA and the PAC's related recommendations. I do want to make 3 important observations. First, RIPA is the law of our state. It provides a scientific approach to the emotionally and politically charged issue of policing disparities. It doesn't erase the politics or the emotions, but it does empower us, and in fact, it commands us to look beyond them. Second, San Rafael RIPA data clearly and reliably demonstrates serious racial policing disparities for Black and Latinx people in this city. The good news is the data also allows us to pinpoint the causes of those disparities, and the state RIPA board prescribes research-based best practices to address them. That is what the PAC's recommendations are. Third, unfortunately, law enforcement in this community, as in many communities, remains deeply resistant to RIPA and its requirements. MV Free's efforts to inform and support the PAC in the face of that resistance have cast us in a seemingly adversarial position with respect to the San Rafael police. So let me be clear. The policing disparities in this city are not unique to San Rafael. They are the same systemic Black and Latinx disparities that plague all Marin County law enforcement agencies and over 90% of California police agencies. San Rafael has a hardworking police department, and they have a lot to be proud of, but that does not absolve the agency or this council of their legal and ethical obligation. What does that mean? That means taking appropriate action like the PAX RIPA recommendations to eliminate
Thank-
the proven and serious racial policing
Thank you for your
disparities
comments.
in our city.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? You're welcome to state your name, if you'd like.
Good evening. My name is Edward Rusky. I am a member of MB Free. I'm speaking as such and also as an individual. Racial policing disparities in San Rafael are no joke. Despite what police unions and their lobbyists like to claim, the evidence available under RIPA is clear and indisputable. If you have any doubts, please read the document that was provided to each of you entitled RIPA Reliability. I might add, please read the document addendum to the annual report, which was provided to each of you, neither of which appears in the packet. I don't understand that. But please don't be distracted by what really matters here. Heidi reminded you of what led to the formation of the PAC in the first place, and what RIPA and the PAC's equitable policing recommendations are all about. What are they? Black and Latinx people right here in San Rafael are suffering and have long been suffering from serious racial policing disparities. I'm not saying this to attack or even embarrass the SRPD. A lot of factors, including systemic ones, contribute to racial policing disparities, and some of them have nothing to do with officer bias. But the good or bad intentions of police don't change the way people of color experience San Rafael policing. San Rafael's Black and Latinx community members are subject to police practices like pretext stops as much as 15 times as often as whites. They feel the weight of the constant cloud of suspicion, and they live in fear for their loved ones, afraid of these too frequent encounters with heavily armed police. These are the harms RIPA and the PAC's RIPA-informed recommendations are meant to correct.
Thank you.
Please don't close your eyes to
Thank you
these
for your
painful
comments.
truths. Thank you.
Welcome.
Good evening, Jason here. Please pull the PAC year-end annual report from the consent calendar. At the May 2025 meeting, MV Free presented a detailed analysis of San Rafael's RIPA data. The findings showed clear racial disparities and included 4 specific policy recommendations to address over-policing of minority residents. The PAC voted in favor of all 4 recommendations. That is a matter of public record. Yet the report before you tonight describes these same recommendations as merely under consideration. That is inaccurate. It erases the committee's formal vote and misrepresents its actions to this council and to the public. Whether the police department ultimately adopts those recommendations is a separate issue. PAC's role is advisory. Its duty is to deliberate and forward its recommendations to you. When the committee votes, the vote must be accurately conveyed. Downgraded adopted recommendations to under consideration materially changes the record. I have served on advisory committees myself. I have seen staff sideline and dilute recommendations that were uncomfortable or politically inconvenient. This is not a technical error. It goes to transparency and public trust. Advisory bodies only work if their decisions are conveyed to you fully and without revision. If San Rafael is serious about accountability and addressing documented racial disparities, then the record must be corrected. Please pull this item and ensure the report accurately reflects PAC's vote before it is approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments on the items on the consent calendar?
Good evening again. Stephen Bingham, Carolinda. I want to second the comments that have been made and focus particularly on the procedural issue here. What the staff has done in presenting this report this way to you is a real insult to the members of the PAC. For a long time, they weren't even allowed to vote, as if there was some rule that advisory committees can't vote. They finally won the right to vote, and lo and behold, on a critical issue in this annual report, they conveniently left out this recommendation, the 4 recommendations that MV3, and I really congratulate them for the work they've done. They should really be hired as experts on RIPA by the city. But the specific thing we're asking is that you pull this from the consent calendar, which if it's on the consent calendar, you just vote up or down, and then we go on to other business. We want to continue a debate here. You need to treat this as a non-consent item so that all of you can participate. It's serious business to treat volunteers who volunteer to work on the PAC, to treat them this way. And I fully expect that you're going to pull this from the calendar so we can have further discussion this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment for items on the consent calendar?
Good evening, Vice Mayor and Council members. Daniel Alm, PAC member. Want to thank the opportunity to be able to serve my community. I appreciate that I've been chosen to do this very impassioned work, and I take a lot of pride in it. I'm very grateful for my colleagues that I work with, the city staff, and also the police department. I think we have formed a really collaborative and productive relationship. With that said, I too would also be remiss that this is our hard work has been put on the consent calendar. I do respectfully understand that is not normal. We did have our first annual report presented in a fashion before the council, but I think we have a lot of important work that we would really like to publicly discuss. I do want to highlight a few things that I really want to make recommendation of. Police culture was a topic that we talked about. And it is my recommendation that we have at least an employee engagement survey so we can measure and continue our discussion on police culture. And I really highly encourage council to find funding and city manager to instill a police engagement survey, employee engagement survey. It's a gold standard of measuring an organization. Also, I think we would greatly benefit from a community survey so we could have a combined discussion. Also, I would like to mention that I was the lone no vote on approving the report before you. I do feel that it was an inequitable presentation on the RIPA data versus the subcommittees group following our vote on the RIPA data. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on the consent calendar? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council for a motion.
I move that we adopt the consent calendar.
Is there a second?
Second.
First and a second. Okay. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy.
Aye.
Councilmember Hill.
Aye.
Councilmember Yedenskalani.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Kurtz.
Aye. That motion passes 4-0. Moving on to other agenda items. We have the Canal Neighborhood Active Transportation Enhancement Project. And we have Director Miller getting set up. Great, thank you.
Hi, April Miller, Director of Public Works. I just want to kick off this project. So we're here tonight to talk about the Canal Neighborhood Active Transportation Enhancement Project. And what's before the council tonight is two action items. One of them is to approve the findings for the project for CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. The findings that we found are exempt. Gray will go into that more later, but that's the first action item. And in order to release the funding for the next phase of the project, Caltrans requires us to have findings under CEQA prior to getting funding. So the council a few months ago approved the first set of funding, which was environmental and preliminary engineering, and which was a small bucket of money compared to the contract that was approved by City Council. So now we're here to request Council to approve the next set of funding so we can continue to study the scope and the project. And just want to clarify what's not being acted on tonight. And so Gray will go over an informational item for the project. However, tonight, Council is not approving plans, specs, estimate. You guys are not approving lighting elements on the Starkweather path, whether they should be included or not. And this project or this presentation and action are not going to talk about the art installation on Peoples of Canal, and there's no decision that's being made. So we just want to be clear on what's part of tonight's agenda and what is not part of tonight's agenda. So now I'm going to turn it over to Gray.
Hello, Gray Milgard, Senior Civil Department of Public Works and the project manager for the city for this project. We do have an informational presentation with these two items. Brief history, project overview, the CEQA analysis that Director Miller mentioned, some data on the existing path use, some of the feedback that we have already received from our community, and some of the next steps for this project. So just really quick, brief project history. So it's kind of a conglomerate of a bunch of different planning documents. The 2018 Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan identified the need for bike boulevards and secured bike parking. 2022 Canal Community-Based Transportation Plan identified the need for pedestrian, bicycle, and transit upgrades in the neighborhood. And then 2022 had some lighting workshops with Dominican Voices to Canal, Canal Alliance, and identified some key lighting routes. Brief project overview. So we have pedestrian, bicycle, transit, and lighting. Pedestrian facility improvements, we're talking crosswalk enhancements, sidewalk gap closures, and curb ramp improvements. Bicycles are those bike boulevard treatments, and secured bike parking at Pickleweed Park. Transit stops with our transit partners, so shelter enhancements at 5 separate locations, and a new transit stop at Kerner Boulevard and Novato Street. And then lighting improvements, 2 separate sides, lighting improvements both along roadways and along pathways. Here's just a general overview of the project. This is also available on the project's website if anyone would like to take a closer look, but just shows the extent of the project and where the proposed enhancements are contained. So CEQA status. So this evaluation was done by LSA, who's an environmental consultant working with BKF, the project engineer. In September of 2022, as a little background, Senate Bill 288 was signed into law by the governor, providing statutory exemptions for projects that are related to pedestrian and bicycle facilities. The project qualifies for a statutory exemption under Public Resource Code 210-8025, subsection B1, and meets the specific criteria as specified in that same 210-8025, subsection C, D, and E. Additionally, the project also qualifies for a categorical exemption as an existing facility that's Class 1, consistent with the provisions of the state CEQA guideline sections, that's 15301 and 15300.2. LSA's analysis and memorandum was included in the agenda packet, and they go into a lot more detail over each of those sections and how it applies to the project. The project CEQA status is not the only environmental action. So the project CEQA status will be valid with or without the inclusion of the lighting improvements along Starkweather Path. Staff are already working with and will continue to work with other agencies for required permits. So that's the San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission, BCDC, as well as the Water Quality Control Board, Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for any required environmental permits studies that may need to be done as part of that process. I just want to give some additional information. So the pathway lighting that's under consideration, the proposed locations were identified in the 2022 Canal Community-Based Transportation Plan. The proposed types, the overheads or the bollards, and the extents of where those lights ended were provided by our San Rafael Police Department as part of a crime prevention through environmental design or CPTED review. So this image, which is also on our website for those interested, shows the separation between overhead and bollards in the proposed areas near Pickleweed, Baja Vista Path, and along Starkweather Shoreline Path. Just as an example, the overhead versus bollards that we're talking about, the overheads are small 15-foot small area lights with down shields to direct light directly onto the pathway. The bollards are 3.5 feet tall with back shields to, again, draw that light into the center of the path and not allow light spill off the pathway. These are just two examples that we have. The actual model may vary, but just wanted to give a visual. So we also looked at some of the existing path use. So the data that's being showed here was taken in mid-February. This is showing an aggregate average over the last 90 days of when the path was in use. So you'll see dawn right around 6:20, and then dusk right around the 5:30 mark. A majority of visits are in that time between dawn and dusk. We do have some pre-dawn use at 3:77 and some post-dusk use kind of around the 5-6 p.m. mark. And so then we want to talk about the feedback that we've already received. So the city has hosted to date 3 separate community meetings for this project. Some of the main themes of concerns that we heard from residents were ongoing and future maintenance needs regarding the Starkweather Path, increased nighttime activity with the inclusion of lights along the Starkweather Path, concern over impacts to wildlife in the immediate area, as well as impacts to potential nearby residents. Some main themes of interest from residents that we've received, kind of the flip side, more active transportation opportunity and more interest in active transportation if safety and accessibility conditions improved in the neighborhood. Lighting being improved along the path is important. It was closely tied to the perception of safety. And lighting will help improve access to Target, jobs, other amenities, and a major emphasis that the path is one of only 2 local recreation spaces in the neighborhood available. So just want to make sure that that was here. So in terms of community engagement, we do have a survey that is open. It is open tonight. It will remain open until March 19th. The QR code on this page will take you directly to that. We're really trying to understand how the Starkweather Path is currently being used and just general thoughts on the project, how folks feel about it. We also do have, this is on our website, the QR code is here, and then we also have flyers out on the path itself. So if you're walking and you run into one of those, feel free to scan and take that survey. So just some next steps for us. So continuing our community engagement, continue the conversation. The environmental phase will continue with the BCDC permit and other agencies as required. We'll continue to update the project's website with any additional information or questions that come into staff. We will begin the advancement of the project's plan specifications and estimates phase of work, and then continue evaluating potential project elements like lighting. This QR code and link is just to the project website if anyone is interested in that. So in regards to tonight's action, staff's recommendation, as Director Miller said, finding that the project is exempt under CEQA pursuant to those public resource code sections and section 15301, and then authorize the city manager to execute an agreement with Caltrans to release the next phase of funding for the PSNE phase work of the project. That is all I have. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Gray and Director Miller. I'll move it to the council. Any questions? Councilmember Hill.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Thank you, Gray, for the presentation. I was curious because I didn't see this in the packet because you mentioned the CPTED. Does that contemplate that it's recommended because it's believed that the configuration would result in increased safety, or is there a numeric expectation of increased safety? I'm just kind of curious how CPTEDs work. I'm not familiar with that long acronym, which apparently means crime prevention through environmental design. I think I've heard it before, but I'm curious what goes into that report.
Yes, absolutely. So it's, the SEPTED report can be started with an analysis of activity or crime in a given area, but traditionally, SEPTED or crime prevention through environmental design is leveraged for new development, new design, new projects coming up in the city, or for improvements. So in the case of this lighting project, the SEPTED review was based on will the path be more usable, more safe if the lighting properly designed is added? And the position of our SEPTED expert and the position of the police department is that better lighting would make the path more safe. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
But it does, it's clear that there's no expectation that it'll make it, say, 20% more safe or anything.
No, I don't think you can put a percentage of increased safety to it, nor can we guarantee that no crime will ever happen again, right? So, but it's just a better design, a more predictable outcome, more light, less crime. There was some controversy about this. There was a lot of question from the community on, well, won't more light attract people at night? But nefarious activity typically happens under the cover of darkness, right? It doesn't happen on a well-lit path. It doesn't happen in well-lit areas. The lighting in the path will make it easier for police officers who are coming and going, trying to get out there to patrol it, to more easily see what's going on out there, less shadows for people to kind of run between or run from us. But the more light, the more safety I think you'll experience out there.
Thank you, Chief Spiller.
Yep.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much for the report. So you have already mentioned this, but I just wanted to clarify again that the decision that we're making tonight is to request the funding whether the lighting project gets approved or it doesn't. This is for like the improvements in the canal.
That's correct. So the action that's being requested is the CEQA and then the authorization for Caltrans. The decision on if lighting is included or not is not up for discussion tonight.
Thank you. I just wanted to triple check. And what was the other question I had? And right now, the process where we are still with community engagement, as you mentioned, through the questionnaire or the survey and the different meetings that we are still going to have with the community. Is that correct?
Yes, so the survey is still open. That will close March 19th. Staff will look to aggregate that data and probably present it in some way, shape, or form, just on whatever comments we received, findings we received from that. We've had our 3 community meetings.
Yeah, and we've also updated the website based on we have frequently asked questions. So when we've received questions during those meetings or via email, we will update the website to include responses to those. So at this time, we are in the community engagement phase, but yeah, there's been no decision that's been made. We still need to have good discussions on if that comes back, when that comes back to the city council, at what point. I mean, for sure it comes back when we need our next set of funding for construction, but whether it comes back sooner than that, we still need to figure that out. Make a recommendation.
Great. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have one follow-on question. And the items you'd listed of that you're gathering additional, you had research already completed on other projects and forums. The pickleweed project, the park in the field, is there any data from that that's also going to contribute to this project? Or is those really two separate?
The Pickleweed Park project was recently completed. This is kind of a separate conversation specifically around just lighting in the parkway. That came from, I think, some of the lighting workshops that were held.
Perfect. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, anything else? All right, I'll open it to public comment if there's any public comment on this item. You bet.
Hi. I might be putting the cart before the horse, but you guys have done a lot of analysis regarding the flooding in the canal And my only thought when I filled out your survey, great survey, by the way, was that if there's going to be sea level rise, are we putting the cart before the horse? In other words, should the berm, which is what the weather path is, not be raised first? That's all.
Great, thank you. We'll take your question and staff will be able to answer it following. Okay.
I didn't read the report. I apologize. So you may have answered this question. But for lighting, is the lighting to be on all night, or is it one of those situations where like 4 a.m. it shuts off, so then the area is dark again? That's my only question.
Great, thank you. Any other public comment on this item? All right, bring it back. Question around the sea level rise and the berm.
Yeah, so the sea level rise topic has come to city council in the past, and so that there's a long range plan and lots of funding that needs to be secure prior to any sort of raising of the pathway or the next steps for that project. We're looking at, we have funding now to provide a safer pathway, and so we're looking at it as, you know, we could install the lights now, and while we wait for someday getting the funding to raise the path itself. The lights could be, you know, depending on how long that time goes by, could be relocated if we were to receive funding soon to raise the path. There's a lot of outreach, a lot of permits that need to happen before we would get to that point of raising the levy. So at this point, you know, if the council chooses to install lights along the path, then we would do that now, but ahead of any kind of raising.
And then I'll address the question just on operations. With the SEPTED review that came from the police department, the proposed hours of operation were all night. Just leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. And again, we are not considering this is just around CEQA. Exactly. All right. Any other comments?
Yes, so thank you again so much for your work. I know that I'm personally going to continue my, engagement with the community, with the neighbors of the canal, neighbors of the Spinnaker Point, Bay Point. I wonder, and I should have asked this before, but I was thinking it might be helpful just to showcase where the lights are going to be. I guess so the neighbors maybe can see it. But anyway, I know that there are more conversations to have. I'm very happy that we are following our process of the first the concept, then the community engagement, then the design. So we can make sure that we are going to install something that that is going to be helpful for the neighbors. Although not everybody is going to agree on it, but something that hopefully we can find some consensus there. So so with that, I'll be happy to make a motion when the time comes.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? Councilmember Hill?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Thank you, Director Miller. Thank you, Gray, for your report. And just to underscore, this matter does not include any decisions on lighting or artwork installation. So thank you for that. I do want to acknowledge that the community has reached out. Many folks have made comments about this. So, that will continue to happen. So irrespective of what we are deciding tonight, that is still on the table. So thank you for bringing it before us. This is, on balance, a very great opportunity that we were able to receive this funding and take action to create opportunities for more safety in the area. Thank you.
Councilmember Bushy, any other comments?
I concur with my colleagues.
Very good. I do as well. It's around CEQA. Need to move forward. All right. Councilmember Lawrence Galletti.
Thank you. I'll make a motion to adopt a resolution finding that the Canal Neighborhood Active Transportation Enhancement Project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, pursuant to Public Resources Code Section 21080.25B1 and Section 15301 of the state CEQA guidelines.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy.
Aye.
Councilmember Hill.
Aye.
Councilmember Jens Gulati.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Kurtz.
Aye. That motion carries. Do we need to do these ones? Okay, and then we have a second one? Yeah.
Sure. I'll make a motion to adopt a resolution approving and authorizing the city manager to execute a program supplement agreement with the California Department of Transportation, Caltrans, for $630,000 in active transportation program ATP funds for the project.
Second?
First and second, roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy.
Aye.
Councilmember Hill.
Aye.
Councilmember Eden Scolati.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Kurtz.
Aye. That motion carries. Thank you very much, and we're moving on. We have now the fiscal year 2025-26 mid-year budget update. And we have, what are you this right now? Interim City Manager Navazio and also Finance Director Navazio. Thank you.
Sliding over to the director chair. Whew. All right. So before you this evening, this is item 3B on your agenda, is the fiscal year 25-26 mid-year budget update. Largely an informational report, but there are some related action items. So to summarize, the staff recommendation before reviewing the highlights of the report is to, number one, accept the FY 25-26 mid-year budget update. This is the report that presents revenue and expenditure results through the first half of the fiscal year, updated with some projections for general fund revenues and expenditures through the end of the fiscal year. There's a recommendation to adopt a resolution that would authorize supplemental budget appropriations as part of this report, totaling $569,085 across various funds, none of which involve general fund appropriations, but we'll summarize those here quickly. We've also would like council to consider adopting a resolution that would authorize the city to effectively pass on credit card processing fees to for selected transactions where our residents' constituents are paying the applicable fees via credit cards, and the city's been absorbing some now significant processing fees, and so we'll touch on that and seek council consideration of this resolution. And then we'll wrap up with a resolution addressing personnel classification changes and salary resolution updates that we're bringing forward as part of this report. So with that, I will start to go into the report. All of this information is contained in the staff report. I'm just going to summarize that through the first 6 months of the fiscal year, being December 31st, on the revenue side, the city had recorded revenues of $97.16 million, or 49% of our amended revenue budget of $198.4 million. And Table 1 from the staff report in Attachment A kind of summarizes it by our different categories of funds. And the expenditures through the first half of the year totaled $103,055,000 and change. When you add to that encumbrances, which money not yet out the door, but this represents commitments attributable to contracts and purchase orders that the city has executed that are in progress. We've essentially spent and or committed just under 52% of our all funds revenue through the first half of the fiscal year. This is our revenue general fund forecast. I'll just title being a little bit covers. This is the general fund revenues through the first 6 months. And we have recorded about 40% of the revenues, so $42.9 million against the budget of $106.9 million. This presentation and a brief description in the staff report also suggests that based on results through the first 6 months, we are projecting our general fund revenues to, if current trends continue, to come in just above our budget by about $410,000. primarily, there's another slide on this, but it's primarily driven by our sales tax revenues tracking slightly better than our budget estimate, and that applies to both the base sales tax as well as revenues from Measure E and Measure R. I think on the next slide, we'll also note that property transfer tax is coming in slightly above budget, as is through the first 6 months our transient occupancy tax. I would note that through the first quarter, the transient occupancy tax came in much stronger than expected, but in the second quarter has sort of tapered a little bit. So where that ends over the next 2 quarters will depend largely on, obviously, what we have yet to see. But we've downgraded that projection a little bit, but it's still tracking slightly above budget. Some of these favorable results are offset by a few areas where we're seeing revenues tracking somewhat below budget. The main one in the report is our interest earnings. It's under a category of use of money. This is one that has exceeded our budget projections over the last couple of years. So we've been increasing our projections, but it's also a function of sort of the volatility of the interest earnings to fluctuations in the market. Pretty hard to project, but we're tracking it, and we'll continue to report those results here to the council. On the general fund expenditures through the first 6 months, expenses of $58.85 million, encumbrances just under $2.1 million combined. Those reflect expenditures and commitments of about 52.8% of the amended general fund budget of $115 million. Table 5 and Table 6 from Attachment A in the staff report present the expenditures both by expenditure category and then expenditures by department. This, however, is something that I want to highlight here in the next slide, that based on the results through the first 6 months, the general fund expenditures are actually projected to end the fiscal year slightly over budget by about an estimate of $1.7 million. Summarizing the bullet points here and the narrative in the staff report, of somewhat of concern is our personnel costs within the general fund are tracking at about $2.7 million over budget, and we're anticipating that non-personnel expenditures, as they have done typically, to offset that slightly. So about 2.7 over on personnel, $1 million under on non-personnel for about 1.7 million. And we note that by comparison, last fiscal year and fiscal year 2024-25, the council will recall we reported somewhat miraculously the personnel costs were almost exactly on budget, within 100,000. But that follows a number of years where the city experienced significant salary savings based on level of vacancies. The two main factors that we are actively tracking and managing that contribute to the trends, particularly in personnel, is our fire overtime. It's not the only area that we're tracking, but the most, I guess, impactful. They're tracking just under about $2 million over budget, primarily, well, due to a couple of reasons. Number one is I should note that in the fire department, fire services, most of the overtime, the vast majority, is directly attributable to backfilling that's required to maintain our mandatory staffing levels per our station and apparatus configuration. We're always going to be exceeding the overtime budget, but often that is offset by savings from the vacancies that require that level of overtime. What we're seeing in the current fiscal year, as we have done a pretty good job of filling vacant positions, so there's always normal turnover and attrition. We are tracking I guess, a significant increase in the amount of paid leaves, from injury to sick, vacation, parental leaves, that just require overtime and at a rate that exceeds what we had contemplated in the budget. It is not helped by the fact that the overtime budget for both police and fire, and I think across all city departments, was budgeted flat from year to year. So there was no increase built in, even though the underlying costs. So all those are combining to this. I will note that the fire chief, fire management, HR department, risk management is looking at all sort of the underlying causes for this that will hopefully result in somewhat of a kind of tapering of the trends that we've seen through the first 6 months, but equally importantly, provide the information that we need to accurately and confidently build the budget for 26-27 so that we can really capture the the costs that need to be factored in. The other thing that's contributing to the personnel costs tracking ahead of budget is the council will recall that the budget includes an assumption of roughly a 3.5% vacancy factor, which translates to coincidentally $2.7 million. So if all positions were filled and the budget went according to perfect, which it never does, we would have a $2.7 million gap. So departments, with the exception of what was just noted, are generally tracking within budget, but we are not seeing the salary savings that we had anticipated, in part because we've been filling positions, also just the rate of pay at which those positions are coming in. And again, this is something that we're tracking not just to see where we would end this fiscal year, but it suggests the need to also evaluate how we, where we land on the salary savings factor going into next year's budget, particularly as it relates to public safety departments where oftentimes overtime is required to backfill for those vacancies. It's highlighted in the report, but I do want to mention it here. The council's aware that as a result of what we were seeing here, the city has instituted a hiring freeze presently for the current fiscal year, largely excluding public safety sworn personnel. But part of the reason for the hiring freeze was to sort of tap the brakes a little bit and see if we can, at least in the short term, change the trend line as it relates to our current year personnel costs. I'll be summarizing here quickly. When you combine the revenue and expenditure projections within the general fund, we're looking at potentially a net drawdown of fund balance of about 1.3 million. This is less than 1% of the overall budget, but it's still significant, in part because over the last several years we have ended the fiscal year with some significant favorable general fund results. And so what I included on this slide is just a reminder that it's those favorable year-end balances that have enabled us to, through the budget process, reappropriate and reallocate available excess fund balance for the priority needs as articulated in the council's general fund reserve policy. And so, as we note in the staff report, should this result manifest itself at year end, we would not have much in the way of excess fund balance to then continue to add to the needs that this year imbalances have been supported. So this is all being factored into the long-term kind of framework for fiscal sustainability that we have shared and will continue to work on with the council and provide updates to the finance subcommittee as we work on it, and then bring you updates through this upcoming budget process. The other last financial piece, if you will, of the presentation, in part because of our new financial ERP system that we're still fine-tuning, we're presenting here. This is we're able to present the expenditures relative to the budget for the capital improvement program budget, which is contained within the numbers that we shared earlier on an all funds basis. But right now, the council adopted the capital budget at $15.95 million. with the carryover of prior year capital and some additional council actions since July 1st. Our current amended capital improvement budget is 34.2 million. And with the expenses and encumbrances, we're about 34% of commitments on the CIP. Of course, these come in big chunks as projects come forward for contract award. We're hoping that in future reports, we will also be adding an additional attachment that actually presents this summary by individual projects. So you'll see the projects that are completed, largely expended, aka almost completed. Those are in process, and those that are continue to be pending. I mentioned again the resolution in attachment B in the report. This is a summary of the supplemental budget appropriations that are being included that cover reappropriations or supplemental in the paramedic special revenue fund, the library fund, recreation revolving fund, also some adjustments to one of the assessment district funds for the Loch Lomond Marina, and a request for an augmentation in our traffic mitigation fund to update our traffic mitigation program guidelines. That nets to $569,085. This table highlights that almost $425,000 of that is offset by corresponding revenues. And so really there's just about $140,000 that would be coming from available fund balances for these funds. And then while it doesn't have a net budget impact included in the resolution, we came before the council a few meetings ago, got approval for a supplemental budget appropriation related to the MTC 1 Bay Area grant. We recommended and processed that appropriation in our Development Services Fund, and our accounting staff has noted that that is appropriately to be reappropriated through a grant fund because we're tracking it as a grant fund. So we're just going to reduce one and offset the other. Briefly on the credit card services fee, just one slide. Again, staff's recommending adoption of a resolution consistent with authority under the state applicable government code section that not only allows city councils to authorize the acceptance of credit cards for payments to the city, but not too long ago was amended to also allow local agencies to pass on the related credit card processing fees for these transactions. So the resolution would authorize the staff to assess a credit card processing transaction as proposed. It would be up to a not to exceed amount of 4% or the actual cost to process, whichever is less. So effectively, it's the actual cost not to exceed 4%. So we're capping it there. At this time, we are asking that this is a somewhat permissive as opposed to prescriptive, because we have a multitude of different credit card processing systems, each with their own characteristics, and the fees may vary. We also have departments that have already incorporated the costs of these processing fees into the fees that we are charging, so we wouldn't be double. So we are going to be looking at how to implement this as intended. As I noted earlier in the city manager comment, the timing of this is before you this evening, so that should council support this recommendation, we can implement it concurrent with the OpenGov permitting system, where a significant a lot of transactions, dollar value, a significant amount of credit card processing, and therefore a significant amount of fees that the city has historically absorbed. We note in the report that for fiscal year 24-25, the city incurred over $600,000 of credit card processing fees, $180,000 within the general fund, but nearly $500,000 in our development parking. But each will have a little bit of a nuance in terms of how we implement it. So that's what's before you. I would be remiss if I didn't note that any of our residents, customers, partners can clearly still avoid paying a processing fee by paying through a means other than credit cards. The last item is the mid-year personnel changes. It's really limited to 2 items. One is the creation of a new job classification, which is also included in the packet, proposing to add a new classification of principal engineer / traffic to distinguish it from the more generic principal engineer position, particularly as it relates to our efforts to staff up our traffic engineering department. And so and in doing so, the staffing complement within the Department of Public Works, essentially senior civil engineer position, has been upgraded to this new classification. And with that, we would need council approval to update the salary schedule to include this classification. Also, there's the resolution included with the personnel changes would authorize updating the salary schedules that pertain to temporary seasonal retiree salaries merely to reflect the minimum wage increases that went into effect with this fiscal year. So just to recap, we have the acceptance of the mid-year budget report once all your questions and public comments have been taken. Adopt a resolution for the supplemental budget appropriations of $569,085. Adopt a resolution authorizing the including of a credit card processing fee where applicable and appropriate, and a resolution approving personnel classification and salary resolution updates. Concludes the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Navazio, Finance Director Navazio. All right, I'll open it up to questions. Any questions? Yeah, Councilmember Bushy.
I have 2 big picture questions and one more focused. On the big picture, it seems to me that the 2, I want to say errors, but unexpected results with interest rates not returning the level of interest income we anticipated, as well as staff vacancy rates being, I want to say better, that not being what we're expected, is that we're sort of living in the past and need to update. And I'm wondering if that is your plan, or what is your perspective on those 2 factors in the budget?
Yes, thank you for the question. I maybe wouldn't characterize it as living it in the past. What I would say is this, among other areas, are areas that we need to assess and better understand as we make future forecasts, because we weren't necessarily budgeting based on past trends, but it's only been 2 years, 3 years that we've built a salary savings factor into the budget. And as we go forward, one suggestion on that one, for instance, instead of having an across the board, vacancy factor, maybe there's a different vacancy factor for, sworn public safety, for instance, versus certain classifications. But I don't want to minimize the fact those are both areas that we would be looking at and are candidates for refinement in the assumptions that we build into future budgets.
I like that. Candidates for refinement, particularly in the vacancy rate when we're working very hard to bring that down.
Yeah. I would note that what makes it a little bit not interesting is that the on pure numbers, the vacancy rate is floating around the probably a little over 3%. And as you know, we will be reporting on the vacancy rates in future reports as we bring the budget. But just the value of those vacancies is not just the average pay for a given position. So we need to just be a little more thoughtful in building that into the budget.
Candidates for refinement. Moving on to the specific question. I'm a little bit concerned about your proposal to have permissiveness in the credit card fee. Where the credit card processing fee is embedded in the cost of the service, there's a cross subsidy between credit card users and non-credit card users. So if we're going to decide that it's our policy that we're going to allocate those fees to people, to the people who use those credit cards, then that should be applied consistently and across the boards. So it sounds like your anticipation is that the rollout will be uneven.
Maybe I can play back the phrase I just said, candidate for refinement. I guess my point is in implementing it presently, if the council approves this, because certain fees have this embedded in it and some don't, we can't just, we believe that it's appropriate to apply it where we could and should, but we're not in a position to apply it across the board. But as we potentially bring forward our master fee schedule for this upcoming fiscal year and we look at these areas a little bit more closely, it would be ideal to work towards consistency across. This was just to be sort of fully transparent that, how do you handle it with a parking meter charge, for instance? You pop in, put 20 minutes on a card, and there's a, charge for that transaction, which wipes out a chunk of the fee. So there's some policy things that we still need to work out to arrive at the consistent application of this. But in the meantime, there's some significant costs that we think are appropriate to recover through this fee. And so that's why we're asking for the council's permission to apply it on a case-by-case basis until we get to a place where we can be consistent.
Well, or to adopt the strategy of assessing these fees to the users and to implement them as feasible in an orderly way.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hill.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Thank you, Acting City Manager and Finance Director Navazio. Hope that becomes simpler to say in the future. On the I'm going to start at the low and then pull it back. My first question is on the TOT performance in Q4. Is it that it's not performing well and that's unexpected, or is Q4 often a time when there are lower there's lower revenue in TOT performance?
Yeah, so just so we're clear, because we're talking about the fiscal year, we're showing results through the Q1 and Q2 of the fiscal year.
I mean Q4 calendar, apologies.
This may not answer your question satisfactorily. What we saw was significantly higher than expected receipts in the first two quarters. And because we're already into March and we've have a glimpse at what's ahead, that trend is not continuing.
Gotcha. And we would expect it to based on performance in calendar.
Right. Where there's seasonality in any of these revenues, we use that information in our projections so that we're not straight lining or, missing what's happening when you have cyclical or seasonal nature in receipts.
Thank you. My second question is on overtime, and I picked up on the word trending. Am I to infer incorrectly that we're seeing, if it's about 2 million and we're projecting 2 million overtime, that we're already seeing 1 million in overtime, then we are anticipating that another 1 million, or am I inferring incorrectly?
What I would say to that is if we were to straight line the current trend for overtime, it would actually exceed this estimate. So what we are building into the estimate is an expectation that we will be able to kind of rein it in somewhat, but it's not going to wipe it out entirely because we need to staff our fire apparatus.
Understood. Yeah, and I do note that you had said that there's some amount of research and analysis that needs to be done to figure out the root causes.
Yeah. It would be, from one person's perspective, a little bit of a concern or alarm if this was the new normal that we would have to factor in. So, you're always going to have some of these spikes and anomalies, but we need to continue to do some work on it to assess what's, we can manage, what's within our control or what's underlying.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, at least one factor, I saw a bullet that there was a contribution of what seemed to be an uncharacteristic confluence of sick people being sick and parental leaves that are at least in my opinion, transient in nature. I would love to hear the full analysis when it comes out, or at least understand if it's something, whether we control it or not, if it's a transient condition.
Yeah, and I think also the other factor, without getting into it, is the heightened incidence of work-related injuries, because that's not just a cost issue, but that's a safety issue for our staff. It's also impacts potentially our service delivery. So getting a handle on and trying to manage incidents of work-related injuries is probably top of that list.
Thank you. My next question is on the credit card fee policy. So I am supporting it, and I appreciated Councilmember Bushy's questions around what it would mean in its rollout. I am $618,000 is a significant amount for an annual incurrence that we've been paying. And I work it out to about $1,700 a day. That is substantial. Over time, obviously, some transactions are going to create more, but essentially what I'm hearing, and I appreciate both the accuracy and the transparency of it, but that is a significant amount of money. I'm glad that we are this is coming before us so we can correct it. How soon do you think we would effectively be able to at least start to move downward from 618? Would it be after this evening, or would it take some time to roll out?
I think we would be implementing it as intended, probably right away, if approved, for instance, in the OpenGov system. Maybe that's just a little toggle switch. But we also want to make sure that we're communicating transparent with the customers so that they know what their options are. The balance of it will depend both on how the various different credit card processing systems sort of interface with our billing system, and then again, as we said, how the fees were set to begin with, because some will include them and some would not. I would just note that it used to be not too long ago that cities were precluded from passing these fees on, which led to what Councilmember Bushy noted, which is there was a cross-subsidization because everybody was paying a little bit more to cover those fees. So this is just a step towards, as we do with most all of our fees, is where we're looking for full cost recovery. What is the actual cost? Well, in some cases, it depends on how it's paid. And it's obviously much more significant for a $100,000 plus permit application than it is for an $8 single one-off swim lesson. The percentages might be the same, but the magnitude is vastly different.
Actually, I have one more question, and it is on the classification. I'm noting that, and maybe I'm imagining a connection with attracting and retaining top talent, and with respect to traffic engineers. Is this matter related to making certain that we can attract and retain the very best talent for traffic engineering?
Absolutely is. Yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lawrence Gladdy.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I had questions about the credit card fees, but I think it has all been answered. So thank you. I would just say what you mentioned, that I think as long as we communicate with our customers, so they are aware of it, I think that would be important. But thank you.
Thank you. My question is sort of along the same line around notification on the credit card fee. I know our resolution is to give authorization at this point, and I'm curious in terms of how the community will be notified, or if there is a legal requirement, because I know today there, as I'm using my credit card, it will come up and say fees are included, processing fees are included, or would you like to include processing fees as part of that transaction? I don't know if that is a legal requirement in terms of how we have to do that. Don't need to answer it now, but I'm just curious if as we go forward from a notification perspective, if we need to actually notify at time of transaction, or if that's not necessary. And I was trying to look up at Park Mobile because that's the one that we use for downtown for the metering and other things. So, who actually gets those, absorbs those fees? So that's sort of my question around that piece. The second one is the use of money, which I find is a really interesting named category, but the investment strategy. And in the state of where we are in the country right now, do we anticipate that we're going to have to reevaluate our investment strategy? Or is there a concern enough that we'd go relook at the investment strategy?
Let me answer it this way. I think it's appropriate to always review the investment policy strategy on a regular basis because it's never a just set it and leave it. That said, what we're seeing so far this fiscal year, probably just clarify it, is I think more reflective of, like I said earlier, sort of some volatility in interest earnings, particularly with the timing of certain investments maturing and then reinvesting. So if something at a higher interest rate matures and you're reinvesting it in a lower interest rate environment. Also, for a number of years, the city has been accumulating fund balances and cash balances are invested. So part of this is also does reflect sort of using some of our cash balances as we're advancing projects. And lastly, and I want to be careful on saying this, I work with our finance team on this, GAAP and GASB now require us to also record as interest earnings, just like the paper. We talked last time, I think when the numbers were very positive, it's sort of like a unrealized capital gain that you never actually see because at maturity, you're reinvesting your principal. Similarly, this number, not to get too alarmed, is some of it is just unrealized capital gain loss on something that will also not be realized. So what we're actually working on in the finance department and with the auditors to make sure we're clean is taking the volatility of the paper gain and paper loss out of the revenue estimate, because if this number was outstanding, it would not offset overtime expenses.
Right.
So there's a little bit of apples and oranges when it comes to the cash involved with the interest earnings and the your financial statement reporting of gains and losses.
Moment of time, point in time. All right, great. Any other questions, comments? All right, open it up to public comment if there's any public comment on this item. Seeing none. All right, bring it back. Any other questions or comments from the council? No? Yes.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Well, thank you, Acting City Manager and Finance Director Invazio, for that report. That was very helpful. It's always great to have the opportunity to hear your characterizations of both facts and your testimony and opinions about where we are. So I appreciate that very much, and I look forward to making the motion to advance at least the first one forward.
Okay, we have 4 motions on this one. We'll take each one separately. Councilmember Hill, would you like to start?
I'll start off. I move that we accept the fiscal year 2025 to 2026 mid-year budget update, presenting revenue and expenditure results through the second quarter of the current fiscal year through the accounting period ended December 31st, 2025.
Second.
First and second, roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy.
Aye.
Councilmember Hill.
Aye.
Councilmember Yeden's Galati.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Kurtz. Habit.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. Second one?
I'll keep going.
Okay, thank you.
Move that we adopt a resolution authorizing supplemental fiscal year 2025 to 2026 mid-year budget appropriations totaling $569,085 across all funds.
I'll second.
Second. First and second, roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy.
Aye.
Councilmember Hill.
Aye.
Councilmember Yeden's Galati.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Kurtz.
Aye. All right, motion carries. Next one.
All right, I'll keep going. I move that we adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager or designee to apply a credit card processing fee for payments received through credit card, debit card, or electronic transfer transactions to selected transactions.
Second.
First and second, roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy.
Aye.
Councilmember Hill.
Aye.
Councilmember Eden Scolati.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Kurtz.
Aye. Motion carries. And last one, you're on a roll.
Keep going. I move that we adopt a resolution approving personnel classification and salary resolution updates related to traffic engineering staffing and temporary seasonal retiree minimum wage adjustments.
Second.
First and second, roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy.
Aye.
Councilmember Hill.
Aye.
Councilmember Eden Scolati.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Kurtz.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Director Navazio and the whole finance team. It's a lot to pull together. It really helps us as we start looking and thinking about next year's planning. All right, moving on. Mid-year updates to the City Council, 3-year strategic plan, fiscal year 2025-26 work plan.
All right, good evening, Vice Mayor Kurtz and members of the council. John Stefanski, Assistant City Manager. I'm going to tee this up before I hand it off over to Vedika, but while she's pulling up the presentation, just want to take a brief moment to acknowledge Vedika Huja, as well as Priya Nixon and Sean Mooney and our entire director team and mid-manager team who have worked together to compile this mid-year update of our strategic plan work plan. As you all will recall, late-ish last fall, we brought this forward to the council to approve. And this is our first go at this new strategic plan work planning structure. And so we look forward to your continued engagement and feedback on this. And with that, we'll hand it off over to Vedika.
Hi, council members, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm Vedika on the digital services team, and I'm going to be talking about the City Council 3-year strategic plan, mid-year fiscal year 2025 and 2026 work plan update. So the recommended action is staff recommends that the City Council adopt the mid-year updates to the City Council 3-year strategic plan, fiscal year 2025-2026 work plan. So just some background on the strategic planning process. The City Council adopted the 3-year strategic plan in June 2025. Staff developed work plans for this fiscal year 25 to 26 for each of the 7 priority areas, and these work plans were adopted on October 20th, 2025. And the current work plan includes a mid-year status update to the City Council. These are the 7 priority areas included in the strategic plan, and each one of these has a work plan associated with it. So for the mid-year update process, staff reviewed each milestone in the work plan and answered the following questions. What is the status of the project? If the project is deferred, or if the milestone is deferred, why has it been deferred? And have the timelines changed? So these were the work plan status indicators, either complete, on track, which is work is progressing as planned, or it will be finished within this fiscal year. Not started, so it's work has yet to begin, but still planned to finish within the fiscal year, or deferred. So the end date is delayed beyond this fiscal year. And the status for each of the milestones are in the updated work plan in the staff report. This slide shows a summary of the projects in the work plan. So staff have kind of translated the work plan into projects, and 10% of projects in this fiscal year's work plan are fully complete. 73% are on track to be completed in this fiscal year, and 17% are planned to be deferred to the next fiscal year. So complete here means that every milestone in a project is fully complete already. 73% will be complete or plan to be complete by the end of this fiscal year. And I'll review some of the key accomplishments and key deferrals that are all outlined in the work plan in more detail. So A21, staff have developed a gateway/beautification pilot for the Central San Rafael Gateway. The pilot was presented to the Economic Development Subcommittee in February 2026. C22, the Wildfire Action Implementation Plan. Staff continued implementation of the Wildfire Prevention and Protection Action Plan, including implementing the Zone Zero grant program and installing the Safe Parking program. D11, staff identified 350 Marydale as the interim shelter site and secured City Council approval of a grant agreement with the County of Marin to support the purchase and setup of the interim shelter project. The City Council the City Council adopted the mobile vending ordinance, establishing a balanced regulatory framework to support vendors while maintaining neighborhood standards. F31, staff conducted opinion research polling to place a ballot measure for a library tax parcel renewal on the June 2nd, 2026 primary election ballot. Additionally, staff has presented a fiscal sustainability framework and tax measure strategy to the Finance Subcommittee and to the City Council. G21, the city drafted the first inclusive outreach and engagement guide to provide staff with the framework, tools, and resources to implement meaningful community outreach and engagement across all departments. This was paired with regular community engagement team meetings with the goal to support staff in delivering coordinated engagement that gives all residents the opportunity to help shape city actions. So on to deferrals. Some of the reasons, or these are the 5 reasons for deferrals that are listed in the work plan update. Either the scope increased, beyond what was, as the project went on, the scope increased more than what was anticipated to begin with. Staff absence, so either staff was temporarily reduced or there are vacancies. Overestimated capacity, so in this case, the scope of the project is the same, but there was less capacity than anticipated to complete the scope as is. Funding unavailable or other. These reasons, there were emerging projects that came up which required strategic reprioritization, or there are some other reasons listed in the work plan with further notes. Some of the key deferrals is A2.2, updating the objective design standards is deferred due to scope increase and may be considered as part of a larger update for the downtown precise plan. B17, staff recommends focusing resources on long-term and permanent planning versus the interim use planning of 620 Canal, and has identified promising near-term funding opportunities for permanent plans. D12, staff is deferring developing a homelessness strategic plan to ensure capacity for the 350 Marydale interim shelter implementation. F21, the HR team had planned to acquire and implement a new software for human resources management this fiscal year, but due to staff capacity and a vacancy on the team, will instead plan to utilize a module in an existing software for human resources management in the next fiscal year. And G36, the digital team had planned to lead the replacement of the canal Wi-Fi project, but the cost to replace the equipment exceeded estimated cost. And so we'll plan to try to fit this into the budget for next year. Okay, and that concludes my presentation.
That's great. Can I make, yeah, sorry, just a couple of concluding remarks on it. So as the council can imagine, a ton of work involved, not just in preparing this information, tracking the information, but actually delivering on the work plan. 2 things I would note that I've mentioned to a couple of council members. Number 1, I would just note that while this report primarily provides the mid-year update of the year 1 work plan, it is the year 1 work plan. It's the first time we're using this tool, and I don't want to lose sight of the fact that a huge value and our kind of grappling with this is refining how to use the tool, both for internal tracking, planning, and alignment with resources and budget, but also as a communication tool back to the council. And so feedback on how it's even working as a tool is as important as what quarter is a particular work task going to be identified. And to tie it again back to not just our budget discussion tonight, but our ongoing work on developing the next year's budget, we will be bringing you a year 2 work plan concurrent with the 26-27 budget. And as part of that conversation, I just want to note that staff has done considerable work in developing what we hope to be a useful tool once a year 2 work plan is adopted, how to evaluate these emerging priorities that may come up and do come up from time to time, and which ones might rise to the level of needing to bump something from the plan or be deferred. And so we won't go into that obviously as part of tonight's conversation, but it's part of our ongoing effort to really wrap our heads around how to utilize a tool like this to keep us focused, but also to allow for these emerging issues that will come up, and how we hope to bring those back to council when they come up. So with that, back to
Okay, very good. Thank you. Great report. Any questions? Councilmember Bushy?
Very specific one. In your staff report in table 2, you put the summary of key deferrals. And on that list, you have priority area E, quality of life, identify funding for the SAFE team. It's in your staff report, but it wasn't on your PowerPoint. Why was that?
We just picked a few key deferrals. Yeah.
Okay.
It's yeah.
So this is the complete
The
list.
staff report is the complete
Is
list.
the complete list.
Yeah.
Okay.
Could I add to that, because it came up, I think, in a council conversation? We've successfully identified funding to continue SAFE Team through this and next fiscal year. I would say that there's still work to be done on securing a long-term, ongoing, sustainable funding source.
Great, thank you. Now turning to the acting city manager's question about how this is working. I think it's working fantastic. First time out, you had what, 17% of your projects are being deferred, which means that 80% are on track. That's success. So I think it's great. I really liked the list of accomplishments and deferrals. Take it up to the high level. Shine the light on the things that are important and at the strategic level, and then having to update it for emerging things, which may be emergencies. Yes, that's exactly why this is here, and to say, okay, this thing has emerged and we need to deal with it. So our form-based code is going to have to wait. That's perfect. That is exactly the vision that I think we had when we adopted the extremely detailed work plan. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember Hill?
Thank you, Vice Mayor, and thank you, Vedika, for the report. My questions are very detailed, and I have similar comments to what Councilmember Bushy had. But with respect to drop, I saw one data point on there that said dropped among those circle charts. Do you know? Can you indicate what it was? Because I couldn't find the word drop anywhere in the staff report.
We ended up, thank you. We ended up making that deferral actually in the overall, because we're going to talk about if any projects are dropped in the end of this fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm pretty sure
Good.
drop
That was
in one of the
very,
categories.
very detail oriented.
Thank you. And then on the F21 HR module that is going to use Tyler instead of another, is there, just to confirm, this is very operational in nature, but is there a reason why Tyler wouldn't be a good permanent opportunity to support HR?
So I will take that. So when we were faced with the staff vacancy in HR, we wanted to reevaluate all the things that were on the plate for that department. And in conversations with finance team and the ERP team, realized that the Tyler Munis platform would actually be able to satisfy the city's needs on a permanent basis, such that we were able to reevaluate not proceeding with that HR software at this time, and then pivoting to something that was already available.
So is it possible that deferral or drop might be appropriate for that one?
Yes.
Okay.
But that's something that we'll bring up as a part of this year 2 work plan, because there's a workload impact with that decision.
Gotcha. Well, I like that. I appreciate that we don't want to be ahead of ourselves, but I like that maybe there's one that could be considered an opportunity for a drop, especially if it can be done that way. But I'm hearing that it will require work. Would you say that, and just confirm, because I didn't see it here, that we did not anticipate something that emerged onto the work plan that is completely novel, or is everything that we contemplated there? It's just something might have been pulled forward and needed to be accomplished sooner.
It's a really good question. What comes to mind for me with this is relating to the Marydale project, which I'm knee deep in. When we were negotiating the grant agreement with the county, there was a requirement for us to go and entitle the property, which when we were developing this plan, we didn't include that level of detail because we didn't realize that that was going to be something that we would have to commit to. And when we look at the timelines for us to perform under that grant, we did have to evaluate and proceed with issuing an RFP to get a developer on board. So we would give ourselves the runway to meet those commitments under the grant. So that's an example of a maybe an emerging priority, but it's something that will get incorporated in the year 2 work plan. But we wanted to make sure we were really setting ourselves up with the runway to successfully deliver on that, which the lion's share of the major tasks associated with that will take place in the next fiscal year.
Thank you very much. And I'll include a comment about that in my final comments, because I think that's what I'll preview that. I think this is a very effective framework to be able to express what we expect to do, and then obviously have it at the ready to modify. What doesn't immediately stick out, and maybe it's another dimension that maybe we can evolve to, is at least be able to express the magnitude of effort involved, because I think an accomplishment on one thing might be 10x the accomplishment on a smaller thing. And I also wouldn't want that to dissuade us from being bold and going after the big thing just because it'll take more. I don't want us to only go after the fruit that we can pick easily, but sometimes we have to reach a little farther because they're more meaningful. So I'll make a comment about that later. Thank you.
Oh, I'm on. Yes, I also agree with the comments from my peers around the way that you capture the data and you present it. I think is extremely helpful. And thank you so much to everybody that has been involved, which is everybody, because this is all the departments in the city. So I have a couple of questions specific about some of the delay projects. And I also want to mention how incredible all the work that we have done this year, considering that we have 2 new properties that we purchased and everything else that's going on. Being able to include it into our plan, is quite remarkable. But I still have a couple of questions. One of them, I noticed that I think is the A41, the evaluate the downtown precise plan related to to objective design standards and to clarify residential density and height standards for downtown. I believe that what I'm seeing is on the draft plan that is only like one of the quarter delay. I think as we are seeing a lot of developments coming to the city is outstanding. We need more housing, but at the same time we see buildings with 17 floors. So I think that's something that I would really like to see. I don't know if it's the calibration between the height and the density if we need to adjust that. So is that going to, is this what I'm seeing here? Is that the project?
Yeah, and just to clarify for objective A41, the draft document shifted essentially all entirely into this next fiscal year. So no work on that is at least currently slated to begin in the current fiscal year. And that's something that, and I'll defer to, Micah and his team on this, but, as a part of the study sessions that Micah and his team have been preparing for the city council, with the first one that was held earlier this month and then the one planned for later this spring, that's what's really going to drive what this objective specifically looks like as it relates to the year 2 and potentially year 3 work plan. And so I don't know, Micah, if there's anything else you want to add.
Micah Hinkle, Community and Economic Development Director. As you recall, we actually had a council work session really kind of looking at this question mark about downtown precise plan, looking at some of the densities and options. It's really the evolution really of really the development that's occurring within our community. Originally, this was targeted as objective design standards, right? We really were focused on that end. But as time has gone on, they've kind of grown into like a bigger scope and questioning. It's enough where at least the council feedback on that work session we had on development for downtown and densities. Staff is gonna return back at the second work session and really kind of talk about, okay, if you want to look at adding those pieces, this is what that scope would look like, the time, cost, and efforts. And really, it's just trying to set up the council expectations on, do we want to head this direction or is there another route to take? Also looking as part of those work sessions, the next one that really is targeting kind of like a housing policy, right? Kind of the target end of what we're talking about for development. But it all speaks to the same pieces, but it speaks to kind of our work programs as like during time, we learn more, we understand more. And we also, the little scope creep, a little more information required, and also really establishing what it takes to deliver really what this council is looking for. And I think that is some of the specific things, particularly for those work sessions, asking council, like, okay, this is where the staff believes we're at. Are we on the right track or do we need to adjust? And I think that's that feedback's been so important with both our subcommittees and our council as a full. But the work sessions really is the format we're trying to get at, since it does really involve the full council.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you so much. I think it's, as you were mentioning, it started on one thing and now we are looking at another one where I feel personally that it has more urgency. And that's the part that when I'm looking at the fairing, that makes me a little bit nervous, but I trust you, that you have a plan and we can follow that.
Definitely. And one thing I'll really add for a lot of the work program, it doesn't take into account the day-to-day operations, right? This talks about like the targeted ends or what council looking at, but for all the actual required by law processing of permits and other things, at least the Community Economic Development Department does, we had to actually assess for that. That's why I'm looking at staff capacity. There wasn't the capacity we thought we had because we took on a mountain of applications, which is true. So it's really just trying to reflect that as part of, we look at really the balancing of how we get the work done.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Then I saw a couple, two more. One, it was the B17, the interim use for 620 Canal. I know that I think there is a parallel work going through that project. One is the feasibility study for the bridge and all that's happening to build it, and the other one is like, hey, we already have the land, so let's make it a park or whatever we think is going to be. So I guess so I was just curious to see how far we are thinking to postpone it. I mean, I saw it on the plan, but I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit around that.
Yeah, so I know the Public Works team is working on securing the site with fencing, but we have a core team who are focused on what the future use of 620 Canal is, and we have been working very closely with Canal Alliance on some very promising grant opportunities, such that we felt compelled to say, we have interim options here, but we also don't want to forego on these potential really nice funding opportunities that dovetail into what the development of that site would be ultimately. And so evaluating and applying for those grants, that takes time versus focusing on the other interim uses. And so it's this kind of struggle of what are the opportunities that we think are going to pay off. And so when we were developing this update, that was what the staff team was recommending that we do in partnership with the Canal Alliance.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Oh.
Hi, Catherine Kufa, Library and Recreation Director. Just to add on to what John was saying, I think when we originally developed the work plan, we felt that that park, the kind of the ultimate goal was probably a number of years away before we were even going to be able to get started. And with some of these opportunities, we're seeing that we actually may be able to develop that park more quickly. So we're kind of focusing on that for the moment. If those pan out, then that's kind of where we're going to kind of focus our time and effort, is getting to that final goal. if some of those grants don't pan out and it looks like we may have more of a gap between now and when that final project happens, we will look again at the interim use. But for now, if we can get that final park faster, that's kind of where we would like to spend the time and energy.
Yeah. Music to my ears. Thank you so much. And huge appreciation as well for Public Works, because the land is, it just needs a lot of work. So, and it was something that, again, it wasn't planned. So really appreciate that. Okay, my last one is, and this is something that I have brought up before, but is the tree ordinance revision, and that's the A36. And to me, trees are the infrastructure as well, and as important, especially as we are having a lot of new developments coming into the city, and also acknowledging that we have a lot of our trees are over 50 years old. And I keep seeing people cutting mature trees that they are not necessarily replacing. So I guess I would love to see how can we, work on this. I know that there is like some of our neighbors, they have offered to help, and I know that the city has to manage the project, but I'm curious about that, and also looking at the A22 update objective design standards. I think I don't know if this is the assets for the city or if it's something different, but wondering if somehow it can be combined. I'm just trying to figure out how we can get a hold of that tree ordinance revision. So, because once we lose one of the, the mature canopies, we won't see them again in our lifetime. So yeah.
So I'm going to defer to Director Public Works, April Miller, and as she's coming down here, I will say that she has had a number of staff, not vacancies, but staff on leave. And so I know that's impacted a number of things on her plate, but defer to you on this one.
Yeah. Hi.
You don't have anything on your plate.
No, nothing at all. Public Works Director April Miller. Yeah, it's what Assistant City Manager John Stefanski said. We're short-staffed right now. I mean, we lost our senior management analyst at the end of last August, and so we just got a new person in, and that person was the person who was going to help with the ordinance. But as you know, there's a lot of competing priorities. It takes a little while for somebody new to get up to speed. And also we have, 519 4th Street, which is one of the priorities too, and all these other priorities that are competing with this person's time. But we, are expected to start the ordinance. I can't remember exactly what it says on there, but that is our goal, is to kick that back off and to spend some time on it. So it's still a priority. We just didn't have enough staff.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. And I think those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to try to bring it up a little bit in terms of the overall, because I think the concept of the work plan is fantastic. I mean, we absolutely need this, and it's really a tool, and it's ever evolving. And as a project manager, I know how hard it is to take whatever is everyone's doing day to day and put it into a document that people are going to look at. I do have a question in terms of, it doesn't necessarily have to be from the public side, but internally, are you using a rating and ranking of how items are being prioritized in terms of the work plan? So I'll just put that out there in terms of how things move up and down the priority list of the work plan, of similar to what we do with the CIP, from a rating and ranking. I'm just wondering if you do that internally or if that's something you would consider.
So that's something that I think dovetails into what Paul was talking about, is the approach for identifying what changes and emerging priorities get incorporated into the year 2 work plan. A lot of what drives, this in the current year is just what our existing budget is and what our existing staffing is. So like in the instance of, April's example on the tree ordinance, when you have certain positions that go out, that kind of necessitates what gives in terms of what's on the work plan that's being done, just because we have staff that are fully programmed working on other priorities that may not be able to pick up where there is a vacancy in the work plan. And so that's why some of these things are moving forward, some are deferred predominantly.
Okay, all right. Sort of along that, was the mobile vending, that was not in the work plan, or was it initially in the work plan, or was that an over the fence item? I don't recall the timing.
If I may, that was included in the work plan.
Okay.
That wasn't an added item, and so
It
that
wasn't, okay,
yeah,
so
that
it was
reflected.
included. Okay, because I was gonna say that in terms of identifying new items, do you see anything in the work plan today that would be considered something that got incorporated into the work plan that was not previously identified?
Could you maybe ask that? Because I'm trying to.
Let me
I'm
take,
trying to think, like, I was gonna say with mobile vending, if mobile vending was not part of our work plan initially, but now it's built into the work plan, but it doesn't show that it was a new item. Are there any other projects in there that are new that were not initially part of the work plan?
You want to? I
can't think of
any.
any.
Not since October.
No, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I make an observation? Just you mentioned sort of, the criteria for what gets into work plan and use the capital budget as example. So the rating criteria, as I understand it, for the capital, when we're updating the 3-year plan, is what goes in there, and there's criteria. I want to remind you, the guiding principle behind this work plan is the council's 3-year strategic plan. So when we're looking at the budget, it's like, what work plan items can we reasonably say that we can accomplish with existing staff and existing resources that help advance the goals and priorities established by the council 3-year plan. So, during the year when there's staff capacity, it's like, oh, well, which project might be deferred? So something that's kind of almost, I don't want to say a little bit on the fly based on where things are at and what's needed to keep something going versus starting something. I think a good maxim, I would say, it's better to get a few things done and do them well than try to advance everything a little bit. And so that's sort of the thinking behind it. But ultimately, what gets added to the work plan, whether it's at the beginning of the year or through an emerging priority, is really going to be whether it's a health and safety related item, a mandate, or has a direct link to advancing item on the council's 3-year strategic plan.
Great.
That's the framework.
I think it ties into what Councilmember Hill was mentioning was if we don't have that, then everything has a value of 1, where some things may have a higher value based on what our priorities and goals are. So I appreciate that. The other thing that now looking back at it, and it was we approved it going forward, but like I would have put in Marydale as a new emerging that came in as an implement. We had Explore, but Explore and implement are very different. And so as soon as we started implementing off of the Explore was done. The implementing is what we're doing now. And so I think we need to recognize and acknowledge that work. And there might be others. That was the one that I'm closest to understand. But as I was looking through in terms of identifying, but I think in some cases, what we thought was going to be an explore or let's analyze, that it turned into a whole project.
So just to couch back, because we don't have the crystal ball, our city clerk reminds us that public comment on SB 707, the requirement to implement public comment, is that the Zoom? That's something that we're going to need to address. It was not contemplated when we put the work plan together, but needs to be implemented by July 1st. And so there's some work going on. Whether it's baseline activity or work plan activity, we can debate.
And so using that as an example, that's not in today's work plan?
That is in today's work plan. It was not in the initial work plan.
It wasn't in the initial.
Correct.
Okay. And are you using Asana? Now I got into the detail.
Yes.
Yes. Great. Okay. That's it from me. Anyone, any other comments? Any questions from the public on this item? Welcome to state your name and your neighborhood.
Yes, good evening, Vice Mayor and council members. Marianne Nonestad from Sandville Meadows. I'm speaking today regarding agenda item 3C on the strategic plan update. While the staff reports lists the identification of 350 Marydale and the securing of grant funding as key accomplishments under Objective D11, I must express concerns regarding some lack of transparency in the project's long-term vision. At your December 15 City Council closed session meeting, in the public comment section, Ken Dickinson, a resident of San Rafael Meadows, and on behalf of the Meadows and surrounding neighborhoods, presented a letter in person to this council requesting early, direct engagement before the 350 Marydale project concepts were finalized. He specifically highlighted in the letter the sudden change on the website in the project description to minimum of 80 units, where it were 80 units, which signals a much larger entitlement decision than originally anticipated. Despite our request to meet before decisions were baked in, the city issued a formal request for proposal, RFP, on February 19. This RFP explicitly requires developer to propose at least 80 units and sets a developer selection date of August 2026. By moving the RFP stage now, the city is bypassing the community's request to shape the project's density and scale from the start. The strategic plan update notes that certain expert panels were deferred due to the politically complex nature of the Marydale site. This complexity is a direct result of the breakdown in trust experienced by residents. I urge the council to pause and honor our invitation to meet with impacted neighborhoods before you enter into an exclusive negotiating agreement with the developer. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this item?
It's more of a question, and maybe you answered it earlier. Is this the same information that's available online as a part of your transparency objective, or is this report only available to internal members? One, and just to understand a little bit, when you say something is on track, I assume that the specification was so specific that there was no change to it from the beginning until this point. So you're saying, oh yeah, we know exactly what we're asking it to have done, and we're making every one of those, we're checking every one of those boxes, and when we deliver it, we'll deliver it exactly as we promised in the beginning. One, and then that's the question. And then for the items that are considered deferred, next year they'll be partially completed, I believe. They'll be starting from not ground zero, or maybe they will be just cleared. Oh, we'll just start over, throw everything away. I doubt you're doing that. But then does that create another category of restarted? And does that say it should be done more quickly or differently? And that's really all my questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. A couple of questions came through there.
So yes, so this information is online. We have the original work plan up, and then we'll have this one up following this item tonight. But I know the Vedica and the digital team have been exploring some other platforms that we can use to better report out what this work plan is, Asana being one of those items, but there's some work on the back end that's needed to make that happen. And then to answer the question around, whether items are on track or things that we, I think to Al's question, are progressing as planned. And yes, so when we were writing out the various milestones and tasks under the work plan, when we say something's on track, we said we were going to do this, and now we've been able to do this, or we're in the process of doing whatever that item may be. And then the last question, deferred versus restarted. And I think what he's getting at is these aren't, finite like buckets of time that we're operating in, and that in fact, when we were doing the update of this work plan, We actually have departments that are also planning their year 2 work plan and what those items are going to be, because these timelines kind of turn into this Venn diagram where, yes, we're 6 months into this period, but we were planning for year 2 and so on and so forth. So while things are deferred, it's a little more fluid as it relates to the status of each of these items. And so, yes, some things may be deferred, restarted, maybe something that we look to evaluate for the year 2 work plan, but generally things are progressing.
Great, thank you. I'll just add one comment onto the deferred that we may decide again, like as you just said, it's deferred. We may decide to, move it off altogether or change it. Like we know more now. So, okay, great. Bringing it back to the council. Any other questions or comments? Not? I think, comments, please.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Thank you again, Vedeka and all staff for responding to our questions and the public's questions. I think that I will build on Councilmember Bushy's prior comments, which are that this is working as intended. I also, insofar as we are trying to create as much, here's what we intend to do, and we are pre-declaring that as either emerging priorities come forward or changes in the landscape, or even owning it that there's a misestimation of capacity, that we are going to do the right thing and make those adjustments as we have done this evening. I also want to direct to both staff and community at the same time when I say this, that this is an opportunity for us to be able to do this openly. What I don't want staff to feel is that because this is on paper, this is the hard thing. These are hard words that are written into stone. I want staff to feel that they can be as bold as they can be, and the council has their backs. That as things come up, this is the right place for that to be expressed. And to the community who are disappointed, especially, we did receive a fair amount of engagement through email about disappointment on deferrals. To you, what I would say is that I feel disappointed too, but I would not say that this is a result of anything that the city has done incorrectly. Rather, we are responding to emerging needs that are coming into our community, and that in due time we are going to get to those work plans as well as it is aligned with our strategy. So thank you for bringing this forward. I did say earlier that I would offer that if we could indicate some effort dimension on it, I think that would be helpful. I also understand too that it may not take the form of exactly what I'm saying. I can also imagine that in doing that, it creates other challenges. Even how do you measure effort over time? So I'm not sure quite what I'm saying, but I do know that there's some way to express magnitude of effort or resources involved. So thank you for bringing this mid-year update and the opportunity to continue to improve how we do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? No?
Yes, well, I very well said, Councilmember Hill. So I totally echo the sentiment. I just have a lot of gratitude for the team, for the staff. This is a lot of work, and I think this is a great way to really see everything that's happening in the city. I think not just for us, but also for like the public, it's a great way to see how the progress is made. I already mentioned a couple of my, the items, but I totally understand the delay. And so thank you. Thank you for all the hard work.
Thank you. And I'll just close by saying work plans are, it is a record. It has our information, but they're not report cards. They're not something that we all go back and say, we didn't do this, because we all are responsible for all of the work. And you're directing from our priorities and what we'd like to get done. And honestly, we'd probably, if you let it free reign, we'd have much more on there too. So, I think it's really, this is fantastic to see. And as we know, things happen every single day that changes this work plan. and you're showing at a very high level, but we know that there's so much happening on your day to day that these are big projects that we want to move forward. And they take a lot of time, they take a lot of effort, and deferring or delaying, that's par for the course. We know that. And as the projects get bigger, there's more groups and people and agencies and money involved. And so the bigger it is, the more likely that we might see those type of shifts. And so I think in terms of looking at the level of complexity is also looking at the level of how many agencies and how many departments are involved starts bringing in that picture of complexity. So with that, I'd like to ask for a motion.
I'll make a motion to adopt a resolution adopting mid-year updates to the City Council's 3-year strategic plan, fiscal year 2025-26 work plan.
Second?
Second?
First and second, roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy.
Aye.
Councilmember Hill.
Aye.
Councilmember Eden Scalati.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Kurtz.
Aye. That motion carries. Thank you. We'll now open it up for public expression continued for anyone who'd like to make a public comment on items not on tonight's agenda. Hello, Mr.
The impression I get sometimes is that the city council is reluctant to engage the community in performing acts that they perform themselves. There seems to be some resistance to having, and I heard planting trees. Well, oh, you can't do that. We do that, as if it were some special skill set that required you to do that. And I think I've seen it in other instances. And I just question that attitude, especially in this period of overruns in accounting. I just think you should think about that. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right. Seeing none, we will adjourn tonight's meeting. Thank you.
Well done.